So I still read other personal finance sites where there are questions going around, you know, should I pay cash for a car or should I lease a car? What should I do? And I'm absolutely amazed that people still ask these questions, and the sorts of answers they get back are, frankly, in some cases ridiculous. There's a fundamental question that you need to answer first, which is a car an appreciating asset, which means does it go up in value over time, or is it a depreciating asset? And of course the answer is a car is a depreciating asset. We know that because if we buy a car for $20,000 today and try and sell it in 5 years' time to this land of American consumers, you're probably going to get $3,000, $4,000 or $5,000 for it, maybe a little bit more. So we know a car is a depreciating asset. So why the hell would you buy on finance something that's a depreciating asset, when in effect you'll pay over that 5-year period something like $30,000 for something that's going to be worth, when you finish using it, $5,000 or $10,000, plus of course the use you've had of the vehicle in the meantime. I've got a more fundamental question than that. Why are you buying the asset new in the first place? Have you seen that as soon as you buy a car and drive it off that parking lot, try looking up in Craigslist or on eBay and see what that vehicle is worth. As soon as you take it off the parking lot, that vehicle probably loses something like 10% to probably closer to 20% of its value, just because it's no longer new. So why would you buy a vehicle or an asset just to throw 10% or 20% of its value away as soon as you take it out? If you did that with housing, we would be calling a subprime crisis. Look at subprime crisis. We're talking about people buying houses in most locations, not Vegas where they've lost 30% or 40%, but in most locations where you buy an asset, being a house today, and tomorrow it's worth 10% or 15% less. And we cry about that. Yet we will buy maybe 5 or 6 new cars in our lifetimes, a combined value probably equal to a house, and we will easily lose 10% to 20% of the value of each of those new cars as soon as we drive off the lot, not to mention other depreciation that's going on. Why don't we treat that as a subprime crisis of its own? And the answer is we should. So here's my advice. Unless you're using a car for your work and can write that expense off on your tax as a business expense wholly and completely, A, do not buy a new car, and B, do not finance it. Pure and simple. Even if you can write the expense off against tax, why tax deduct and still make a 10 or 20% loss, still buy a slightly used vehicle and then look at financing it? So my point is this: it's possible to be rich and to be frugal. For example, I'm well off. I wouldn't be writing this post called, I wouldn't be writing a blog that tells you how to make $7 million in 7 years if I hadn't done it myself first. Yet I consider myself frugal, yet I buy whatever I want. So being rich and being frugal doesn't mean I'm being a miser and not spending my money. That's miserly. What it means is I'm spending my money sensibly. So for example, one of my rules tells me that I could effectively buy a slightly used Ferrari. And a slightly used Ferrari might cost me $250,000. However, I've never had a Ferrari. I've never driven a Ferrari. I would love a Ferrari. So what I did was I went and bought myself a Maserati. A Maserati is about half the price of a Ferrari and brand new, and is only about 0.5 of a second slower and uses all the same running gear as a Ferrari. So because I've never driven a Ferrari, am I really going to notice a difference in performance? The answer is no. So I'm frugal in that respect. I've just saved myself $125,000. But I'm even more frugal than that because I didn't buy the Maserati new. I went and bought one that somebody else had driven off the parking lot for me. And you'd be surprised, the more expensive the vehicle, the more common that occurs. And why does that occur? Because somebody who's got more money than sense buys that vehicle, realizes it's a sports car and not a comfortable car that as you would think it would be, and wishes they really bought the Mercedes instead. So because they've got so much money, more money than sense, they take the depreciation in that vehicle and then they go buy a new one, and take the depreciation again. So they now made themselves a 40% loss, all within 6 months. So I bought my Maserati, 6 months old, with less than 2,000 miles on the clock, with extra options, and I bought it for $35,000 discount. So that is what I call being rich and being frugal. And the same principles apply if you're buying a $125,000 vehicle or buying a $35,000 vehicle. Don't pay the $35,000 if you can get it for $25,000 by buying one that's slightly used. That's always been my principle. So buy used, buy slightly used, whether you're using it for business or for yourself, and then pay cash. Otherwise, you're losing money and you're not investing that money anywhere else.